of different parts of the world. And we are really looking forward to this very interactive session where all of us will be definitely benefited. All the students, all the teachers, all the professors, we extend our hearty welcome to each one of you, and we are indeed grateful for all of you to take time to attend and to be a part of this webinar. Now, I would request Reverend Father Joskudi PD to kindly deliver a small inaugural address for the gathering.
Thank you, Professor P.D. Joseph. Am I audible?
Yes, Father. Yes, Father.
Yes. My dear friends and honorable guest for the day, Professor Jayasri, I am immensely happy to welcome all of you once again to attend and be a participant in this webinar, which is organized by the Christ Jayanti College of Law. Christ Jayanti College of Law is managed by the CMA congregation, which started its education 190 years ago by its founder, Saint Kuriakos Elias Chavara. And at present, CMA congregation organizes and serves the country through various institutions, including deemed university, engineering colleges, medical colleges, law colleges, higher education institutions, and also schools in different parts of our country. More than 1,100 institutions altogether. And today we have a webinar or a conference with a difference. Christ Jayanti College of Law, from its very inception in the Christ Jayanti campus, Bangalore, where 3 services are being offered through Christ Jayanti College of Law, through Christ Jayanti Autonomous College, and Christ Jayanti School of Management. All the 3 institutions always look forward to empower the graduates with knowledge and wisdom. At the same time, we are always looking forward for the networking of individuals, institutions, and organizations for knowledge sharing and mutual empowerment by organizing various programs inside the campus. But in this unprecedented time of lockdown, we have been reminded about the importance of technology and the need to include it in our teaching learning. Technology has given us a platform where scholars and knowledge seekers from different parts of the world can come together virtually and share their knowledge for mutual benefit. We are extremely elated that we are able to create such a platform here under the leadership of Christ Jayanti College of Law in the form of this webinar, bringing all of you together from different parts of our country and also from outside India too. The topic for today's webinar is criminal jurisprudence vis-a-vis culpable homicide and murder. Culpable homicide and murder are 2 most brilliantly defined sections, Section 299 and Section 300 of the Indian Penal Code 1860. Starting from the trial courts to the Supreme Court of India, various attempts have been made now and then in order to clarify and also clearly demarcate the differences between these 2 sections. As readers of criminal law, as students of law, as teachers of law, as research scholars of law, and also as citizens of our country who are governed by this code, it is absolutely essential for us to know the difference between the two. I am sure that under the leadership of Professor Jayasri in this webinar, we will be able to clear this ambiguity by her insights. And dear Professor Dr. Jayasri, Christi Jayanti College of Law, and all the participants and all the organizers are immensely grateful to you for your valuable presence here to inspire all of us in this webinar by your insights, by your experience, and also by your knowledge and wisdom. Your 33 years of research and academic experience, and also the honors you received at the state and national level, widely speak about your ability and also the knowledge resource in you, in your mind, and in your evaluation. My dear participants, my dear friends, it is my great duty to appreciate the dynamic presence of Professor Jayasri amidst us to guide us in this webinar on criminal jurisprudence vis-a-vis culpable homicide and murder. On this occasion, I appreciate the Christi Jayanti College of Law for their innovative and also their academic ventures with new ideas every now and then under the directorship of Reverend Dr. Father Emmanuel PJ and the principalship of Dr. Mohan Rao Bella, always with the support of all the team of faculty members. They make a difference and they proclaim together. Together we can make a difference in the society and in the country. And for this webinar, Professor Preeti Joseph is taking the lead to coordinate. I am sure all the participants will have an enriching time and also an empowering time during this afternoon. Wishing this webinar all the best. I remain. Thank you very much. May God bless you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Father Joskuti, for your such valuable and encouraging words. Before we go ahead, I would just like to lay out how we are going to go about the webinar. After Professor Jayasri delivers her speech, we will take certain questions from the chat box and Professor Jayasri would be responding to those questions. I will be leading that session where I will be reading out the questions, certain selective questions because we are limited by time, and Professor Jayasri would be responding to those important questions. Now, before we go ahead, since Professor Dr. Mohan R. Bolla has been a student of Professor Jayasri, we would really like to hear a couple of words from him before we go ahead with Professor Jayasri's lecture.
Salutations to one and all present here, and respected Madam Dr. Jayasri Lakkaraj. I'm very much privileged to be a student of Madam Jayasri. Madam was teaching us criminal law, and I am the privileged student of Madam, and we are very closely organizing several even extracurricular activities also, visiting various places where there were problems with respect to even lockup deaths, and especially we had taken up to investigate as fact-finding team constituting members from the Legal Aid Committee of Acharya Nagarjuna University. Madam in fact brought out that legal aid clinic from dormancy to enlightenment in a way, and Madam has been leading us in all respects, even court visits, and we had taken up a task at least to be fact-finding team and investigate into bride burnings that were taking place lot in number at that time. And Madam has been leading us and guiding us, and she was besides delivering touching lectures. Madam has been a constant inspiration and guide to many of us all over India and even worldwide. I'm very much honored and privileged to extend a warm welcome to Madam and all the professors from all over India, including professors from different universities. I recognize the presence of Dr. Sita Kumari from Padmavati Mahila University, and I could see a few only, and even my privileged student, Mr. Ambikapati, retired CVA officer, Rahul from Alliance University, and Professor Nagendra Sharma from Crescent University, professors from Beltec University, various professors have joined because of even with a short notice because of the touching topic and the dynamism of Professor Jayashree Madam. Once again, welcoming you all and thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your words. Before I hand over this session to ma'am, I would like to read a short profile of ma'am and introduce our guest of honor to all of you present here. So Professor Jayashree has been in the field of academia for more than 33 years, not only in the field of teaching, but also in the field of research. Her area of expertise is criminal law and administration and women in law. Ma'am has been and continues to be a part of several privileged institutions across India. Ma'am has also written a couple of books, in fact, more than a couple. Some of them are Women Prisoners in Custody, which was published by Kaveri Publication, which is one of the renowned publications of India. Ma'am was also awarded NTR Telugu Mahila Sanskriti Puraskaralu by the Telugu Mahila Rashtra Telugu Desam Party, and ma'am was also awarded the State Best Teacher of Law in the year 2016 by the government of Andhra Pradesh. Ma'am continues to be a member of Legal Aid Committee at several parts of the country, and hence she is widely continuing to contribute in the field of law, which definitely is an inspiration for so many of us who are a part of this session. Without wasting much time, ma'am, I would now like you to take over the session and to lead all of us in explaining the difference between culpable homicide and murder under the Indian Penal Code. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Preeti. First of all, I want to thank the director of this college and the principal of this college, who is my student in the year of 1985. That I was newly joined in the Nagarjuna University as a lecturer. Since then, I know the Mohan Rao. He is my student, so principal to the college, and also the faculty and the students, and I think lawyers and other faculty members from all the other universities have joined as per the information given by the director of the college and the principal of the college. I say for all, good afternoon and welcome to this session. Now I'm going to present this culpable homicide and murder under the Indian Penal Code. Because there is a slight differences between the culpable homicide. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Sound is sufficient?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
This culpable homicide and murder, there is a thin line difference between the two. It is very essential, particularly the presiding officers of the court and the lawyers, prosecutors, they must be thorough with the differences between the culpable homicide and murder, otherwise miscarriage of justice will go on. So we'll see what is the differences. Before going that, we'll see what is a culpable homicide, because all murders are culpable homicide. So if you once know what is a culpable homicide, then we'll go to the differences between the culpable homicide and murder. You all know that section 299 defines culpable homicide and section 300 defines This homicide is derived from the Latin word. Homo means a man, side means I cut. Which means we can say that homicide is nothing but killing one human being by another human being. That means accidental death, natural death, death caused by animals, all those things doesn't come under this category. Very strictly, criminal law is very strict. It won't give any lenience to anything. All the ingredients means 100 ingredients are essential. Suppose 100 ingredients must be present in the facts of the case. So such a criminal law is very strict. So here man means it should be a man, not any other thing. So killing one human being by another human being is the homicide. This homicide may be criminal or non-criminal. What is this criminal and non-criminal? This is based on two important maxims on which the whole criminal law lies. One is, I think you all know it, actus non facit reum nisi mens citria. Actus non facit reum nisi mens citria. The meaning of this maxim is, an act done against my will, an act done against my will is not my act. That is, criminal law punishes only the voluntary acts, not involuntary acts. So here also the killing of one human being by another human being must be caused by voluntary. If it causes involuntarily, again they are not liable. So voluntarily is to be caused. If we voluntarily caused, we can say it is a criminal. That homicide is criminal. Other important maxim on which the whole criminal law lies is, actus non facit reum nisi mens citria. Which means a man cannot be held guilty just without guilty mind. A man cannot be held guilty for mere act without guilty mind. So from this maxim, for every crime, whether it is a serious or less, three essentials are required: physical act, mental element, and consequence. So if the mental element is absent, that homicide is non-criminal. Mental element is absent, that homicide is non-criminal. If the mental element is present and it is voluntarily, then that homicide is killing. So one human being killing the other must be voluntarily and with a guilty mind, then it would amount to the criminal. So this act is non-facit reum, you all know it, I am not going to the detail. The culprit, so because homicide is divided into criminal and non-criminal, the culprit is not always a culpable, is not always guilty. Because in non-criminal, he is not a guilty. Further, the William Blackstone classified homicides into three categories: justifiable homicide, excusable homicide, and felonious homicide. So we can classify the homicide into mainly two: lawful homicide and unlawful homicide. Lawful homicides are non-criminal, that is not punishable. Unlawful homicides are criminal, so always punishable. So what are the lawful homicide? Why lawful homicide is not punishable? All these things are killing one human being by another human being. In all these lawful homicide, the accused had a valid reason to commit a crime. The accused had a valid reason. What is the valid reason? That you can see in the lawful homicides: excusable homicide and justifiable homicide. What is excusable and justifiable? In the Indian Penal Code, there is one chapter that is called the fourth chapter, deals with the general exceptions. So in the general exceptions, it is all absence of guilty mind, because guilty mind must be present to constitute a crime. Physical element, mental element, consequence, all the three must be present. If any one of the element is absent, that type of crimes are designated by Kenny, Professor Kenny and Stephen as inchoate crime, I-N-C-H-O-A-T-E, I-N-C-H-O-A-T-E, inchoate crime, that is incompleted crimes. Generally, these general exceptions are to be used by the defense lawyers. So we all know that when the accused is brought before the court, the presumption is the accused person is an innocent. The accused person is an innocent till the guilt is proved beyond all reasonable doubt. That is, the burden lies on the prosecution. The prosecution has to establish the guilt of the accused person beyond all reasonable doubt. So now in this particular case, the prosecution has presented evidence and proved the case that A killed B beyond all reasonable doubt. Now, after the role of the public prosecutor completes, the burden will shift to the defense. Now here defense says he agrees what all the prosecution says, he agrees with what all the prosecution says, but he says that the accused was child below the age of 7 years. The accused was insane at the time of the commission of the crime. So the whole case gone. The accused will be exempted from the punishment, general exceptions. Generally, the defense has to plead two important aspects. After the completion of the prosecution role, the burden shift to the defense, and defense has to prove one is absence of specific intent required to that offense, and second is any of the general exceptions. So here, these killing one human being by another human being will be excused by law in certain cases, and killing one human being by another human being is justified by law in certain cases. So lawful homicide is divided into excusable, law excuses that killing, justifiable, the law justifies that killing. So lawful homicides are classified into excusable, justifiable. Here the accused is not punishable because he had a valid reason to commit a crime. What is unlawful homicide? Unlawful homicide always punishable. It is categorized into culpable homicide, death caused by rash and negligent act 304A, and suicide. What is excusable homicide? We said that accident causing the death in the accident will be excused by law. Act done in good faith for the benefit of the person. A met an accident and he got brought to the hospital. The doctor immediately, for the benefit, in good faith, for the benefit of the person, performs an operation, but still the patient dies. The doctor will be protected. That killing one human being, another human being will be excused by law. Where the 83 person below a child below the age of 7 years or between 7 and 12, basing upon the maturity of the mind, that killing was also excuses by, because the child, he does not know what is wrong and what is right. His absolute and privilege is given according to the basing upon the age of the child. Unsound person, insanity, section 84. If the person is an insane at the time of commission of the offense, his act is also excused. His act is also excuses. And last is intoxication. Intoxication is a very big topic. I can't cover here, but I can say only one point, that involuntarily intoxication is always excusable. But when you come to the voluntary intoxication, and if he commits a murder, there is a lot of discussions with respect to the specific intent and basic intent. And if the specific intent is absent, he cannot be convicted for murder, but can be reduced to culpable homicide. But I'm not going into the details. So these are the acts where the law excuses killing one human being by another human. This is justifiable by homicide. 76, 78. Acts done by the police officers, 79 and 79 by judicial officers and the person who are executing the duties of the judges, that is the hangman who implemented the death sentence. He will be excused under section 7 because that killing one human being by another human being is justified by law. Similarly, to avoid a greater harm, inflicting a lesser harm will be justified under section 81 of the Indian Penal Code. 96 to 106, right of private defense, it is also justified by law. So because of this, there are reasons to commit a crime. All the lawful homicides, some homicides are excusable, some homicides are justified by law, so there is no punishment. Now we'll come to our topic, unlawful homicide. We said that it is 3 categories. Now our topic is the culpable homicide 299. This is classified again further into 2 categories, amounting to murder and not amounting to murder. So culpable homicide is divided into amounting to murder and not amounting to murder. This all murder are culpable homicide. All murders are culpable homicide. But all culpable homicides are not murders, because culpable homicide includes not amounting to murder. Not amounting to murder. So culpable homicide is divided into amounting to murder, not amounting to murder. All murder includes culpable homicide. But all culpable homicide is not murder because it includes not amounting to murder. Now, what is a culpable homicide? Culpable. This is also a Latin word. Culpabilis means to blame. Blameworthy, punishable. We can say simple. Culpa means guilty. So killing a one man by another with a guilty mind, then it amounts to the culpable homicide. Killing a human being by another human being with a guilty mind, with a culpable intent, guilty mind, then only it amounts to the culpable homicide. So 299 is culpable homicide, and section 300 has 4 classes. Section 300 has 4 classes. 300 has 4 classes. And if the culpable homicide committed and falls in any one of this class, then it would amount to the murder. Clear, be careful. 299, if this culpable homicide is committed and falls in any one of the 4 classes, culpable homicide falls in any one of the 4 classes, then it amounts to the murder. And if this murder committed, the circumstances falling under any 5 exceptions, if this murder falls any one of the 5 exceptions, this amount to culpable homicide, not amounting to murder. This is the scheme of section 299, 300. This you can understand. 299 culpable homicide has 3 classes, A, B, C, and 3 explanations. This is altogether culpable homicide. Murder includes culpable homicide. All these explanations, everything included in the murder. But this culpable homicide and murder has 4 classes and 5 exceptions. And this culpable homicide plus any one of this class is present, then it would amount to the murder. And if this murder committing under falling any one of the exceptions, that amount to the culpable homicide, not amounting to murder. This is the scheme of section 299 and 300. I think you got it. And degrees of homicide. What is the degree of homicide? It was held in the case of Narasingh Chalan versus State of Orissa, 1997, and Abdul Wahid Khan versus State of AP, 2002. The Supreme Court held that 299 is the genus and 300 is the species. And when you come to the culpable homicide, for murder it is 302, punishment is provided. For 304, culpable homicide not amounting to murder is not an independent section. It falls within the definition of section 300. When 300 consists 4 classes and 5 exceptions. So these 5 exceptions falls within the definition of murder. So there is no separate section for culpable homicide not amounting to murder. So how to provide the punishment? So the problem. So here the court said deciding the proper punishment in the IPC, culpable homicide is divided into 3 degrees. 3 degrees. What are they? Culpable homicide of the first degree. That is defined under section 300, murder. This is the greatest form of culpable homicide. This is punishable under section 302, death or imprisonment for life. Fine may be added. So the greatest and the first degree of homicide is the murder. And what is the second degree? Second degree of the culpable homicide is intention to cause death or intention to cause bodily injury as is likely to cause. These 2. Intention to cause death or intention to cause bodily injury. Only if had an intention to cause or intention to, that is culpable homicide class A and B. That falls under section 304(1) and punishable with either imprisonment for life or 10 years or fine may be added. So this is the second degree, is the culpable homicide, where the accused person has an intention either to cause the death or intention to cause bodily injury. What is the third degree? It is the lowest degree. It is the knowledge. This is the intention. This is the knowledge. Knowledge is always lesser than intention. These 2 are the mental elements required for any offense. So there is a slight difference between the intention and knowledge. Very fine, but it is real. So the third degree is the knowledge that is likely to cause death. It is the third degree of homicide and punishment either 10 years or fine or more. So these are the first degree is the murder. Second degree is the culpable homicide with intent to cause death or with intention to cause bodily injury as is likely to cause death. And third degree is the knowledge to cause the death. So these are the 3 degrees have been evolved under the Indian Penal Code, basing upon the degree of probability of the causing of the death. This is the probability of causing of the death of the person. So the punishment will also be awarded. Now, 299, if you have a bare act, go through it. I'm not going to explain. Here, whoever causes death by doing an act with the intention of 3 intention. One is intention to cause death, intention to cause bodily injury, or knowledge that is likely by such act cause the death. These are the mental elements that is required for offense, and there are the illustrations have been given, and there are 3 explanations. 3 explanations. These explanations we'll read along with the ingredients of the culpable homicide. Now, what are the ingredients required for the culpable homicide? Generally, I said in the beginning of the class, for every crime, whether it is a serious or a petty offense, 3 essential elements are required. Actus reus, that is a physical act, or mens rea, guilty mind, and the consequence. So, these are the 3 elements required for the offense. Causing the death of the human being, the death of the human consequence. The third element of essential element of a crime, causing the death of a human being, is the consequence. By doing an act, actus reus, physical act, this is the physical act. The presence of intention, this is the intention. Without intention, a man cannot be convicted. So intention is very, very essential for any crime. So intention to cause death, intention to cause bodily injury, or knowledge. So here, what is the mens rea? 3 ingredients. One is the intention, and the other is the knowledge. What is the difference between the intention and knowledge? There is a very thin line. Intention is certainty, certain, definite. He will expect that what the consequence might be. But the knowledge, he might have the different intention. He doesn't have an intention to cause death, but by doing that act, he will have a knowledge that death might be the consequence. Suppose, for example, A had an intention to commit a robbery in the particular locality. He want to commit a theft or a robbery in a particular locality. For that, he will set a fire in that locality. So in that locality, he can very easily to loot the houses. So his intention is only to commit a theft or robbery, nothing more than that. But there is every chance by setting the fire at the night, there may be either an infant who is sleeping on the cradle or an old man who is unable to walk, may have been caused to death. Caused to death. That is the knowledge. By setting a fire in the night time when all are sleeping, definitely it may cause the death. But it is not his intention. But still he is liable for that knowledge, for the knowledge under the culpable homicide. So for that reason, what is required is, one is the intention and the other is the knowledge. So we will discuss one of the, very briefly, causing the death of a human being is the consequence. Death of the human being must. What is a death? Death means death of a human being. Life means life of a human being, which was defined in chapter 2 of the Indian Penal Code, because killing one human being by another human being. So, death is to be caused the human being. Life is the life of a human being. Suppose if already dead person, if he stabbed the deceased person, it is not an offense of murder. He has to inflict injuries, or he has to pull the trigger on the person who is on living person. So for that reason, these are the 2 things are very essential. Wherever you find the word death or life in the statute book, it is relating to the human being and not to any animal or anything. And what about the child? Now let us see who are the human beings. Man, women. Who is a man? This is also given definition under section chapter 2. A male human being of any age. A male human being of any age, even a 1 month maybe, or 2 months maybe, 3 months, 2 days maybe, is also considered as a man. So causing the death would amount to the murder. So it includes male human being of any age, an infant. Similarly, woman, a female human being of any age. But what is explanation 3? In the previous slide, I have shown there are 3 explanations under section 299. So explanation 3 has to read along with under this head. Explanation 3 says, as long as the fetus rests in the womb of the mother, the child is in the womb of the mother and causes the death of the child within the womb of the mother, it is not homicide. it is not homicide. Causing the death of the child in the womb of the mother is not homicide. It is miscarriage. It is some other offense, miscarriage. When it would amount to the homicide, explanation 3 says, causing the death of a living child if any part of the child has been brought forth, whether the child has been completely breathed or not. So complete born child is not necessary. Partial delivery from the womb, mother womb is sufficient to consider as a human being, and if any child partially delivered and thereby kills the child on the spot, then it would amount to the murder. It would amount to the murder. Now there is a difference between the English law and Indian law. Under English law, the child must be completely born. The child must be completely born, then only it is to be considered as a human being, and killing that child would amount to the murder, would amount to the homicide. Homicide, whether it's culpable or homicide depends upon the intention or knowledge, so it is a homicide. So under English law, the child has to be born completely, but in Indian law, partial emergency is sufficient. So who is a human being in the Indian context? Living man, living woman, and the child at least partially delivered. Child partially. These are to be considered as a human being, and causing the death of these human beings is necessary in order to constitute a culpable homicide. Causing the death of living man or a living woman or a child partially delivered, partially brought forth is essential in order to constitute a homicide. Actus reus. What is actus reus? By doing an act. By doing an act. So, the act is said to cause the death. A did an act. A did an act. Death has been resulted. It is to be established that this death has resulted because of this act. That death resulted because of this act. So you have to take into consideration that is there is a direct link between the physical act and the consequence. So this act is nothing but a physical act. Actus reus. Actus reus. The actus reus is a physical act. What is a physical act? Because mental element is not known, not seen, cannot be read. So through physical act, we can know what is his intention. Suppose if a person took an axe and cut the body of the bee into pieces, what is intention you can understand very easily. He had an intention to kill. So that cutting the body into pieces, that is a physical act, shows the mind of the accused person. So physical act is external manifestation of the mind of the person. So physical act is nothing but an external manifestation of the mind of the person. So God, we said that the physical act and death must have a direct link. They are very proximate. They are not too remote. That is causa causans and not merely causa sine qua non. Causa causans is the immediate link between it. The A pulled the trigger, the bullet leaves the gun, enters into the body of B, B died. So there is a direct link between A and B. Such type of death has to be caused by doing that act. That death must be the proximate. Generally, what is the mode of killing? What is the actus reus? Striking, poisoning, drowning, starving, pulling the trigger. These are generally used for committing an offenses of homicide. Not only that, even with the words also can cause the death of a person, because tongue has the power of life and death. With the tongue, you can cause the death of a person. Suppose, for example, here I have given one example: loud noise before a sick person to awake him when sleep is most essential for his living. Suppose otherwise he is a heart patient. Doctor strictly says that not to convey any shocking news to him. It is already third attack and he will be no more. The person having an intentionally rushed into the room where that heart patient was sleeping and says that all your family members made an accident and died on the spot. This fellow died on the spot. He is held guilty for the offense of homicide, culpable homicide. If it is intention, murder, that comes later, but it is a culpable homicide. So, death can be caused not only by doing an act, but omission also. By act, striking, pulling the trigger, giving a poisonous food, cutting the body into pieces. These are all the not only thing, even with the vomission also you can cause the death. What type of vomissions? All vomissions doesn't cover under this category. Vomissions here refers is only the illegal vomission. Vomission means here it is illegal vomission. When you can say that particular vomission is illegal, means the law must impose some duty on the person and the person has failed to perform it. A duty has lying on the person and the person has not performed that duty. It is called illegal vomission. I will give one example. A duty is imposed on the parents that they have to take care of their children. That is, it is the duty of the parent. They have to provide food and medical treatment whenever it is necessary to the child. If the parents have caused the death of the child either by starvation or not providing the medical treatment, they are held guilty for homicide. Because a law imposed section 125 CRPC and Hindu Adoption Maintenance Act also, they have laid down an important duty on the parents that their parents must take care of them. Similarly, police officer, it is the duty to maintain law and order. If he did not do so, that vomission is illegal vomission. Nurse duty has to give a medicines to the patient as per the schedule. If she did not do accordingly and causes the death of the patient, the nurse is held responsible. So not only by doing an act of pulling the trigger, striking, through vomission can also cause the death of it. So this vomission is where there is a legal duty. Suppose, for example, I will give another example. He is a well-known swimmer. And he was watching a child was drowning into the river. He can very easily save the child. Very easily he can save the child. But he did not make any attempt. The child drawn into the river and died. What is the liability of the swimmer? What type of punishment will be imposed on him? No punishment. Because nowhere in the law says that the person who knows swimming, which causes the funny person drowning into the river and fail to save the life of that particular person who is drowning, that is liable to punishment. Nothing is there. There is no express provision. So the law has not imposed any duty on the swimmer. So the swimmer is not responsible. But there is a moral duty. The swimmer has a moral duty. He has to save the child. So moral duty is different from the legal duty. Moral duty is different from legal duty. Here in the illegal vomission, it applies only to the legal duty, not the moral duty. So it's starving someone, but causing the death. So it would amount to the death. We said that the person, the human being is to be killed. That is one of the essential. The causing the death of the human being is the essential ingredient for the offense. So the offense, when it is complete, as soon as any person is killed. Now here the question is whether the person is to kill the person whom he intended to kill or some other person. So here law says it is not necessary. It is immaterial. If A had an intention to kill B, but unfortunately by accident he kills C, it doesn't matter, no difference. Whether he kills B or C, law doesn't recognize. What is required? Killing a person. Causing the death of the human being is the essential condition required for the murder. So it is immaterial that if the person whom the accused intention to kill was not killed, A wants to kill B, but he did not kill the B. But some other person, C, was killed accidentally. So what he said that he doesn't, I don't know who is the C, I do not have any motive or against him to kill him, I don't have the intention, but by mistake or the accident, no, such type of defenses are not acceptable in criminal law. Because here it says that principal law transferred, this principle was incorporated in section 301 of the Indian Penal Code. That is the principle transferred intent or transferred knowledge or doctrine of transfer of malice. Malice is a specific intention required for the offense of murder in England. So they said that doctrine of transfer of malice. Ours is transferred intent, transferred knowledge. So A had an intention to kill B, but unfortunately kills C. The intent to whom he want to kill, the intent on B is transferred to the C. Transferred to the C, and what is required is causing the death of a human being. C died. So murder, homicide is completed and he is held guilty for the offense. And this concept of transferring of intent or knowledge is not a new idea or not a new concept or a new piece of legislation. It is date back to the British era. So if you look into this is 1886, since 1886 this principle was recognized. R versus Headmasters, here a person got into a fight. There was a fight between A and B. And during the fight, A wants to beat B. For that, he take a belt up and struck the belt. But what happened? It rebounded and hit a lady, and she was grievously injured. So as usual, he pleads that he does not have any intention to hurt her. It was caused accidentally. So accident is the general defense, so he want to excuse him. But the court held that the defendant is liable. The defendant is liable for all the injuries caused to the woman. He is liable. And it is not necessary whether he intended to harm her or not. It is not necessary because the transfer, the mens rea, transferred to the man from the, the transferred to the woman. Here the mens rea has transferred to the woman from the man he was going to hit with his belt. So this, what is required is the accused person need not kill the person to whom he intended to kill. He kill any person. What is required is causing the death of human being. Whether he intended or not is irrelevant. Now we'll come to the mens rea. Mens rea plays a very, very important role in criminal law. Basing upon the mens rea, the punishment will be fixed. The criminal responsibility will be fixed. If you read the Stephen volumes, Stephen has written 3 volumes on criminal law. And 3rd volume, he has given a very beautiful example. That is, there he used the snow, but now here I am using the stone. A throws a stone from the roof of the house. A throws a stone from the roof of the house and it falls on X and X dies. So throwing the stone from the roof of the house is the act of physical act. Death of the X is the consequence. Death of the X is the consequence. So both the physical act and consequence was there. Now I will give 5 illustrations, 5 different examples. In all the 5 different examples, physical act and consequence is the same. Physical act and consequence is the same. A throws a stone from the roof of the house and X died. Okay. Now see the differences. First illustration, A had an intention to kill X. For that, he knows that X will come on the particular route every day in the particular time. So he waited for the opportunity on that day. The moment X comes over there, he throws a stone on his head and X died. This is murder. Because intention was there, waiting for him, knowing that he comes in the direction, so it is intention. Now I will give the second illustration. In the Bangalore, you look into the Jayanagar in the evening, how much crowd it was. Suppose if A throws a stone from some building, roof of the building, he doesn't have any intention to kill anybody. In this illustration, he doesn't have any intention to kill anybody, but still he throws a stone from the roof of the house and it fell on the X and X died. So intention was absent, but knowledge. So a Jayanagar in such a busy street in the evening, how much crowd it was, definitely that stone will fall on somebody and it result into the death of that particular person. This is also a murder because probability of causing death is more. Third, in the same place, he throws a stone in the morning where the crowd is not that much. But still it fell on the X and X died. This is culpable, likely to cause death. Culpable homicide, less degree. Chances of causing the death is less when compared to the previous one. Last, the same throwing the stone in some gully of residential area in the morning, absolutely, generally nobody will come in the morning, early morning, 5 or 6, but unfortunately X came and a stone fell on the X and X died. This is negligent. Death caused by negligent act. Now the last illustration where he took all the precautions, gave warnings, took necessary steps and threw the stone, but again it fell on the X and X died. It is accident. See, physical act is the same, consequence is the same. Physical act is the same, consequence is the same. But first two are murder, next is a culpable homicide, next is a negligent death caused by negligent act, and last is accident, no punishment at all. So that much of important the mens rea had in the criminal law. So this is the same illustration you can apply in the murder and culpable homicide also. The same, you can find the differences between the murder and culpable homicide very easily. What type of knowledge he had, etc., etc. Will come later. So what is the mens rea? Intention to cause death. Intention to cause bodily injury as it likely to cause death. Knowledge that the death is likely to happen. So here there are two ingredients required for the culpable homicide. One is intention and the other is knowledge. There is a fine difference. Just now I have said the robbery. A person who had an intention to robbery, so presume intention, it will be presumed knowledge. And similarly, throwing a stone in the busy street of Jayanagar in the evening, there was a knowledge that the death is likely to happen. So from this intention and knowledge, intention means expectation of the consequence of the act. So if you break the head of a man, clearly shows you can expect the consequence that he will die. And now 300, there are 4 classes. Intention to cause death with the intention of causing such bodily injury as the offender knows to be likely to cause death, with the intention of causing bodily injury to any person sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death, person committing the act known that it is imminently dangerous, that it must in all probability cause death, such bodily injury as is likely to cause death. I will explain this, but just go through it. And there are 5 exceptions. Sudden, grave and provocation, death caused in exceeding the right of private defense, and offences committed with the public servant, death committed in sudden fight without premeditation, death caused of a person consenting to it. So these are the, so 300 consists of 4 classes. 300 consists of 4 classes and 5 exceptions. So if the culpable homicide 299, what we have studied, the explanations and everything, along with it falls in any one of these classes. So far what we have studied 299 plus any one of this class is murder. And if this murder is committed under any one of these circumstances, and that murder is committed in any one of these circumstances, it would amount to culpable homicide not amounting to murder. 299 plus any one of these classes is the murder, and this murder commits in any one of these circumstances, either under the provocation or right of exercising the right of private defense or the sudden fight, or a person gave the consent, so I killed him. So where the murder committed in one of these circumstances, it would amount to the culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Now we come to the differences between the culpable homicide and murder. The difference between the culpable homicide and murder have a minimal differences, very minute difference. Have a minimal differences. So it is very difficult unless and until one had a thorough knowledge with respect to the differences between the culpable homicide and the murder, it becomes crucial to the legal system. Particularly the officers of the court, that is the judges, and the persons who are participating, that is the lawyers and the public prosecutors, they must be thorough with the differences between the culpable homicide and murder. Otherwise, it is not possible to give a fair judgment. Fair judgment is not possible. It carries a miscarriage of justice, because the distinction between the two always perplexing. So one should have a clear idea when the death falls under culpable homicide, when that death falls under the murder, unless and until, particularly the judicial officers and the lawyers, it is not miscarriage of justice or chances are more. So to get a fair judgment, one should have a thorough knowledge with the differences. So Sarbvir Singh was the state of UP 1983 case, and Tangaiya was the state of Tamil Nadu 2005 case. In both these two cases, Supreme Court held that there are certain factors that should be taken into consideration to decide whether the death falls under the murder or whether it falls under the culpable homicide. Again, I am repeating, in these both the two cases, the Supreme Court said there are certain or a pistol or a gun or a lathi or a stick or a knife using for vegetable cutting vegetables and the fruits. What type of weapon he used? That is very, very important. Basing upon the weapon used, to certain extent, you can make the difference between the culpable homicide and murder. Second, place of injury. Where he inflicted the injury. That is very important. Inflicting injury on the hands or legs somewhere is different from inflicting injury on the head and vital part of the body. Vital part of the body. So weapon use, place of injury, ferocity of attack. How he attacked, what is the mode of attack, how much ferociously he was attacked. These are all very important. The last is the state of mind of the accused, mens rea. So by taking these are the certain factors into consideration, to certain extent, we can decide whether the death falls within the definition of the murder, or whether it falls within the definition of culpable homicide. So here I given some example. A person stabbing another person with a knife. A stabs B with a knife. Yakada where in chest or abdomen. So A stabs B in the abdomen or the chest. Definitely we can show the weapon that has been used and how much ferociously he used, and the place we can say that it is a murder. Without any hesitation, we can say. Similarly, several persons are inflicting injuries to a particular person by using various weapons. Some took lathis, some took knives, some took axes, some took lathis. Different. Clearly shows that it is a murder. The weapon they have used, where the injuries have been inflicted. Similarly, the offender inflicts injury on the head, the breaking the bones of the head. Any injury inflicting on the head clearly shows it is a murder. So it all depends upon the probability. The probability determines the difference between the culpable homicide and murder. Probability of causing the death. Probability of causing the death determines whether the case falls into the culpable homicide or murder. Blake versus Govinda case. This is a very old and also a leading case, 1977, where this is the first case where differences between the culpable homicide and murder was drawn systematically by Justice Melville. Here the accused kicked his wife and gave her a few blows on the body. So the wife fell on the ground. The accused put his knee on the chest of a woman and struck her few more blows, and resulting into her death. The facts are very simple. Lower court convicted him for murder. On appeal to the High Court, the two-bench judge, two of them taken different opinion. One said it is a murder, other said it is not a murder. So the matter is referred to the third judge, Justice Melville, and he draws the differences between the culpable homicide and murder very systematically, and concludes that he convicted the accused under Class B of Section 299, culpable homicide. Culpable homicide on the ground that death was caused with the intention on the part of the accused to cause bodily injury as is likely to cause death. So we'll come later again to this case after clarifying the differences between murder and culpable homicide. Again, you apply the differences which I have explained to this case and come to a conclusion how the Justice Melville arrived and convicted the accused person under Class B of Section 299 on this ground. So this is the classification of culpable homicide and murder. This is 299, this is 300. 299 Class A with the intention of cause death, and Class 1 of murder. Here 1, 2, 3, 4, and here it is ABC given in the section. So we have to use the same thing. With the intention to cause death, and murder 1 with the intention to cause death. You have to compare. You have to compare this culpable homicide and murder, A to 1, A and 1 to be compared, and B to 2. So 299B is to be compared with Class 2 of 300. Again, Class B of 299 is to be compared with Class 3 of 300, and last C is to be compared with the 4. Clear? Again, I am repeating. Culpable homicide 299, murder 300, comparative table. So Class A of Section 299 is to be compared with Class 1 of Section 300. And Class B of 299 is to be compared with Class 2 of Section 300. This is a second difference. Third is Class B again. Class B again is to be compared with Class 3 of Section 300. And fourth is C is to be compared with 4. Okay? First, what is with intention to cause death? With intention to cause death. Wherever there is an intention to cause death, how to know intention? Because intention cannot be seen. Intention cannot be known. So, intention can be read only through the physical act of the accused person. So, I have already explained. Physical act is nothing but external manifestation of the mind of the person. Taking an axe and breaking the head of the bee clearly shows that he has an intention. Bengkulu case, state of Hyderabad, where the accused has an intention to kill the deceased, and when the deceased was sleeping in a hut, he locked the outer door of the hut and poured the petrol or the kerosene and set a fire. And when by hearing the noise, neighbors came. The accused threatened and prevented all the neighbors by showing a pistol. So the conduct of the accused from the facts and circumstances of the case clearly shows that he had an intention to cause the death of the deceased. So intention is to be gathered only from the physical act, only from the facts of the cases. So wherever there is an intention to cause death, no doubt it is a murder. Both are murder. Then you may ask, why it is included in Section 299 of the culpable homicide? Because culpable homicide includes amounting to murder and not amounting to murder. Both. So culpable homicide is a genus and murder is a species. So it includes intention to cause death, intention to cause death. There is no difference in it. Wherever there is an intention, it is a murder. Clear? Now we'll compare B and 2. Abdul Wahid Khan versus State of AP 2002. Here the Supreme Court observed first the differences brought in R versus Govinda case by Justice Melville, and again number of cases the judges also brought the differences between the two, and this is the case where the Supreme Court again draw the distinction between the two. Abdul Wahid Khan versus State of AP 2002 case. Here the Supreme Court observed that Class B of Section 299 corresponds to the Class 2 and Class 3 of the Section 300. See, Class B to be Read, compare with 2 and 3. B and 2 and B and 3. That's what the Supreme Court says. B is to be compared with 2 and B is to be compared with 3. So the Supreme Court observed class B of section 299 corresponds with class 2 and 3 of section 3. First compare 299B with 302. First we'll read the verbatim. An intention to cause bodily injury as is likely to cause death. 302 with the intention of causing bodily injury as the offender knows to be likely to cause death. So what is the difference between the two? Here also intention to cause bodily injury. Here also intention to cause bodily injury. It shows that in both the categories, the accused has an intention to cause bodily injury only and not intention to cause death. The accused has no intention to cause death. Both in 299B and 300. Only in class A of 299 and 301, it is an intention to cause death. That is over. Now in the section 299B and 302, if you compare, both have an intention to cause bodily injury. Intention to cause bodily injury. They do not have an intention to cause death. Their intention is only to cause bodily injury. Here, as it is likely to cause death, it is also likely to cause death. Everything is same. What is the difference? Knowledge of the offender. Knowledge possessed by the offender. Here, the accused, the offender, possessed the knowledge. Here, he doesn't possess any knowledge. This knowledge possessed by the offender makes the difference between the culpable homicide and murder. If the offender has the knowledge, it is murder. If he does not possess the knowledge, it is culpable homicide, not amounting to culpable homicide. Okay, what is the knowledge? Knowledge is regarding with respect to the particular victim about health or the peculiar condition that the victim possesses. So here you have to read explanation 2 of section 299. Explanation 2 says, suppose knowledge is regarding the health of the victim. What is the condition of the health of the victim? That is more important. Suppose if he is suffering with any disease, disorder or infirmity, and which is known the accused or known the knowledge, the offender has the knowledge of it, it is the murder. A person is suffering with disorder, disease or infirmity, but the accused had no knowledge of it, that is culpable homicide. So knowledge of the offender is most important. The knowledge of the offender regarding the state of the health or the peculiar condition of the accused makes the difference between the culpable homicide and murder. Culpable homicide and murder. Intention to cause death is not an essential. He inflicted injury and he had a knowledge that he had suffering with a particular disease. By inflicting that injury, injury definitely causes the death of the person, likely to cause the death. So that is the murder. But here class B of section 299 does not have such knowledge. Here I will give one example. So victim is suffering from an enlarged liver or enlarged spleen or a diseased heart patient. For example, the victim is suffering any one of these, enlarged liver or suffering with enlarged spleen or the diseased heart. And now the accused knows, he had a knowledge that A is, for example, you take A. A had a knowledge that B is suffering with a heart patient. And he inflicted the bodily injury. His intention is also to cause bodily injury only. His intention is only to cause bodily injury. But he knows his state of health condition. So he had a knowledge that that injury is likely to cause death. So by giving a blow on the body of the victim, failure of the heart, he may die. This is amount to the murder. Falls under class 2 of section 300. Suppose A had an intention to inflict a bodily injury on B. B had enlarged liver, but that A doesn't know. He do not have any idea about her health. That knowledge was absent. Just he has an intention to inflict bodily injury. And the liver rupture and the person died. It is culpable homicide. Culpable homicide. Very simple difference between section class B and 2 of 300. Knowledge of the offender. If the offender knows that the victim is suffering with a disease, and if I inflict the injury, definitely it's like it will hit on him and is likely to cause death. But his intention is not to kill him or not to cause the death. His intention is only to cause bodily injury. But he was suffering with enlarged spleen. He knows that this injury is likely to cause death. That is murder. A inflicts bodily injury. The victim is suffering with enlarged spleen. He gave a blow on the abdomen, but he doesn't know that he was suffering with enlarged spleen. He had no knowledge of it. He died. It is culpable homicide. I think we followed it. Now compare 299B again with the 300. First read the verbatim. Intention to cause bodily injury as it is likely to cause death. Likely. 303 with the intention of causing bodily injury to any person sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death. What is the difference between the two? Both are intention to cause bodily injury. Intention to cause bodily injury. Their intention is not to cause the death. Their intention is not to kill the person. Their intention is only to cause bodily injury. But here it is likely to cause death, and here it is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature. Generally it is sufficient to cause the death. That is the difference between 299B and 3. We'll see what is the further. Likely to cause death occurring in the corresponding B, sufficient ordinary course of nature used, and obviously that is the difference lies between 219B and 3. Likely to cause death and sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death is the difference between 299B and 303. If it is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature, it is a murder, likely to culpable homicide. What is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature? We'll see now. This distinction between the two is very fine but real. But once if you overlook, if you not carefully scrutinize what type of injury, whether it is likely or sufficient, result into the miscarriage of the justice. If you overlooked whether the injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death or likely to cause the death, miscarriage of justice. So we can say that the main difference between the two, 299 and 300, is degree of probability. Degree of probability. So likely to cause death is causing the death less when compared to sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause it. Probability is more. Likely, when likely is probable. But here sufficient in the ordinary course of nature, it is most probable. That is probable. This is most probable. Sufficient. Anyone can die. Sufficient. The injury that is inflicted A on B is sufficient to cause the death of any person in the ordinary nature. Now read class 3 altogether. It is not intention to cause death. It is only intention to cause bodily injury, and that injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. In Veera Singh vs. State of Punjab, 1958, Bipin Bose explained the meaning and scope of the class 3. First, you have to see whether there is a bodily injury is present or not. First thing required is bodily injury must be present. Then you have to prove what is the nature of the injury. First, injury must be present. Second, what is the nature of the injury? is to be proved. And third, whether that injury was inflicted with the intention or not. First, you have to see whether there is an injury and what is the nature of the injury, whether he has an intention to inflict that injury, and that injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death. This is purely an objective and inferential and nothing to do with the intention of the offender. His intention is only limited to inflict bodily injury. In the rest of the thing, his intention is irrelevant. So what is required? Injury must be present, injury must be proved, and there was an intention to inflict. He must have an intention. Injury must be present, nature of the injury to be proved, intention must be proved, and it must be proved that injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death. See, Justice Bose explained the third ingredient in the following words. This is the judgment. The question is not whether the prisoner intended to inflict a serious injury or the trivial one. Whether the accused wants to inflict a serious injury or a trivial or a small, trivial means a small, pretty injury. That is not the question here. Don't bother for that question. Whether you want to inflict a serious injury or the trivial injury is totally irrelevant. What we require is whether he inflicted the injury. What type of injury? Don't bother about it. You leave it. What you have to prove is whether he is intended to inflict the injury sufficient. Whether it is a severe injury or trivial nature, these are all not necessary. Only what is required is he intended to inflict injury. Intention to inflict injury, bodily injury is sufficient. Suppose if he can show that, if the accused show that he did not have a mental element, he did not have intention. Even the circumstances also justifies and draw the inference that the accused had no intention. Then intention need not be proved and the case doesn't fall under this category. Because intention to cause bodily injury is very important. Inflicting the bodily injury must be with the intention. If the intention was absent, then automatically there is no case falls under this category. So seriousness, these are. What is the question so far the intention is concerned? See, very clearly explained Justice Bose, intention is concerned is not whether he intended to kill or inflict an injury of a particular degree of seriousness. See, the question is, Justice Bose explained that it is not his intention to cause death. His intention is not to kill. Second, his intention is not to cause serious injury. Both are not necessary. Both are not applied. It is not intention to cause death. It is not his intention to inflict a serious injury. But what is inflicted is he has an intention to inflict some injury. So you need not unnecessarily go on arguing all these aspects before the court. Just whether he had an injury or not. What is the nature of the injury? Whether that injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death. That itself is sufficient to convict him for the offense of murder. Need not necessarily prove whether he doesn't have an intention to kill or he has an intention to kill or his intention to inflict a serious injury or the trivial nature. These are all not necessary to prove before the court of law. What you have to prove is only nature of injury. He inflicted injury intentionally. Intentionally inflicting bodily injury. And that injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death. So whole 300 is sum up here. So the rule laid down in the case is intent of the accused was limited to the infliction of the bodily injury. Inflicted, his intention is only to inflict bodily injury. Nature of the injury is not necessary to prove before the court. Injury was present and that was sufficient to cause the death in the ordinary course of nature. So that injury is sufficient, anyone to cause the death, not only a particular person, X, Y, Z, anyone is sufficient to cause the death. So for that only generally in all the cases, if you read the judgments, There, the doctors also give the opinion how much injury has been inflicted, what is the nature of the injury, how much it is entered into the deep into the body of the victim. So these are all the measurements and something will be given, and from that it will be concluded the conclusion whether it is sufficient to cause the death or not. Now the last. With the knowledge that he is likely by such act to cause the death, committing the act knows that it is so immediately dangerous that it must improbably cause the death. Now we have to compare C and 4. We have compared 1, 299A with 1, 300, intention to cause death, intention to cause death. It is a murder always. And B of 299 with 2 of 300, the difference between the two is knowledge of the offender regarding the health of the victim. If we have the knowledge, if we know that the victim is suffering and inflict the injury, he comes under the murder. And if he doesn't possess that knowledge, it is the culpable homicide. And again, B is to be compared with the 3, sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death. So in the B, it is likely to cause death. Both are bodily injury, intention to cause bodily injury. And the last one is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause death. Now we'll come to the last one, with the knowledge that he is likely by such act to cause the death, and committing the act knows that it is so immediately dangerous that it must in probability cause the death. So these two have to be compared. Knowledge of probability of the act causing the death. It requires knowledge of the probability of the cause. So under class 4 and 300, immediately dangerous act, where it is likely to cause death, but here it is immediately dangerous act. That makes the difference between the two. For example, to disperse the mob, A fires at the mob. In one illustration, in other illustration, to disperse the mob, A fires in the air. A fires in the air. One is pepper fire, here is there, one fires called the mob. In which category it will fall? The person who fires towards the mob, there is a knowledge that is imminently dangerous act. Definitely it causes the death of any person. There are chances. So that is murder. Just like the illustration which I have given, throwing a stone from the roof of the house in the Jayanagar in the evening, where the crowd is more, because imminently dangerous act, that is murder. And whereas in the culpable homicide, throwing a stone in the gully of residential area of Jayanagar, likely to cause death, likely to cause. So same thing in the morning, same thing in the morning, Jayanagar, same thing in the morning. The crowd is not that much, but there is likely to cause death. That is culpable homicide. So imminently dangerous act, all the imminently dangerous act falls in the murder, and where probably likely to cause death falls under the culpable homicide. So the knowledge on the part of the offender, the highest probability falls under the murder. Highest probability, less probable comes under the death. And so these are all the other cases also based upon the same principle. And now, what is a Govinda case? Where the Govinda case falls under this category? See, we said that our Rigvas Govinda case, the Melville convicted him with the intention to cause bodily injury as is likely to cause death. Under this head, Justice Melville convicted the Govinda. How he arrived to this decision? Intention to cause death, intention to cause death. Here, what is the mode of physical act he did? Fist to blows. Fist to blows. Is it sufficient to cause the death? Is it exhibit the intention? No. So it is not the intention to cause death. You can eliminate these two. Second, here the accused must have a knowledge that she is suffering with any disease. Actually, she doesn't possess anything. Suppose if there is anything, the doctors will relieve the thing. There is no knowledge of the offender. that she is suffering with any disease, and actually she doesn't have any disease also. And is the fist blows is sufficient to cause the death of any person? No, fist blows is not necessary, is not sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death, but it is only likely to cause death. Likely to cause death. So here it is intention to cause death, intention to cause death. Here all intention to cause bodily injury. All the three are intention to cause bodily injury. Intention to cause bodily injury, intention to cause bodily injury, intention to cause bodily injury. But here it is likely to cause. It is also likely to cause, but the offender have the knowledge regarding the health of the victim. And here the injury is sufficient in the ordinary course of nature to cause the death. And last is the knowledge. It is a more probability. Imminent danger is involved here, and it is less injury involved in it. So culpable homicide. So if you look into that example which I have given by the Stephen throwing a stone, you can very easily understand how we can differentiate between the culpable homicide and murder. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this very detailed, description and difference between culpable homicide and murder, starting from R versus Govinda. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was also a very successful session because we had close to 400 participants who were attending it, and from the comment section we can see that all of them were very benefited from it. Before we go ahead, I would just like the participants to point out certain questions if they want to be asked, and a couple of them did ask some questions, so I would just ask that, ma'am, before we proceed. One of the questions that has been asked is difference between offense and crime. Is there a difference between offense and crime?
Yeah. So this is generally given in the general introduction of the crime. It's a definition given by the many of them, but it is not, they could not come to a conclusion, Blackstone and everything. Anything act committed or omitted amounts to the crime. The result of the crime, the effect, this is also explained in joint liability while dealing with the criminal act. What is a criminal act? What is an offense? What is a crime and offense? Offense is the result of the crime. Offense is the result of crime, because crime is a physical act, mental element, and the consequence together constitute a crime. And the outcome of that three amount to the offense, which is defined under Section 40 of the Indian Penal Code. Except the how to know whether a particular provision is an offense or not. If that section provides a punishment, it is an offense.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, the second question is that if A shoots B and B is taken to the hospital, and when he is taken to the hospital because of the negligence of the doctor, B dies. So who will be held liable in this case?
Actually, this same example I have given in the actus reus, physical act, in the legal Lakkaraju legal lectures. If you go through it, you will come detailed. But anyhow, I will answer it. But detailed answer you will get in Lakkaraju legal lectures, actus reus. So generally, I have explained in the beginning that actus reus, that is the physical act, and the consequence must have a direct connection. Then only the crime is completed. The nexus between the physical act and consequence, that is, the consequence has flowed from the result of that act. A pulls the trigger, enter into the body of B, and B dies, and the death of the B because of the act of A. That must have been. Suppose now the question is, doctor's negligence was there. Now the doctor's negligence was there, and he died because of the negligence of the doctor. Then doctor is held responsible. There are a number of cases where in one case, if the accused person mixes the potassium cyanide and gives to the mother, but before taking that drink, the mother died due to heart attack. So heart attack is an intermediate act between the physical act of the accused and the cause death of the mother. Mixing the potassium cyanide is the actus reus, and death of the mother is the consequence. But there is an intermediate act. What is the intermediate act? Heart attack. So he is held guilty only for attempt to commit a murder.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, another question that one of the participants...
All these things they will get in the
Yeah.
actus reus essential elements of the crime.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, one more question that one of the participants is asking is inducing a person to commit an act causing death? I think it is more about abetment to
Abatement.
suicide.
This is an abatement,
Yeah.
not an abatement.
So, ma'am, just can you clarify that it is not falling under culpable homicide?
No problem. They can ask, no problem.
Yeah.
They will be confined to this topic only.
Yeah, ma'am, and one of the other topic is that can you throw some light about euthanasia or honor killing? Will it fall under culpable homicide?
Yeah, we said that there are 5 exceptions. 5 exceptions given. This is the 5th one, death caused of a person consenting to it. This is not an excuse in the Indian judiciary. This comes under the culpable homicide not amounting to murder. There are a number of cases because the other party gave the consent and thereby the person, whoever it may be, the accused caused the death of the person. It is not a murder because he killed him because he gave the consent. So it falls under the culpable homicide not amounting to murder. We said that if the murder is committed under any one of these circumstances, here the murder is committed because of the consent given by him. So this amount is the culpable homicide not amounting to murder and is liable under exception 5 of section 300 and punishment is provided under section 304 of the IPC.
Madam,
Okay,
But there are, if you go through the detail of it, there are some more essential ingredients. The person must be 18 years, consent has to be given, the consent must be free. Again, it comes to another topic, it takes time.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Question. The other part of the question relates to honor killings, madam.
Honor killing, yeah. Now honor killing is also rampant in all over India. Reputation. We do not know to whom we have to be support. Whether the parents, because we are the parents, we know the attitude of the parents, and it's very difficult. It also comes, but honor killing is a murder only.
Yes.
It falls and doesn't fall in any one of this category. It is not exception. Honor killing is a purely murder, intentionally, whatever it may be motive. See, motive is not necessary. One more important point I want to convey. Motive is not important to criminal law. Their motive might be anything, but deliberately they have killed the either the son-in-law or the daughter, whoever it may be. Honor killing. So it is a murder. It is a murder, not a culpable homicide or culpable homicide not amounting to murder. It is a murder.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think these are just the questions that we have for today. Now I would request Reverend Father Emmanuel to kindly deliver the vote of thanks. Reverend Father Emmanuel, PJ, thank you, Father, thank you.
Professor Dr. Jayasri, the Honorable Presentator for the day, Professor Dr. Reverend Father Joseph Kutipidi, the Principal of Christianity College Campus, Professor Dr. Mohan Ragwala, the Principal of Christianity College of Law, all the management team of Fathers, Reverend Father Augustine George, the Vice Principal, and Father Lijo P. Thomas, the Financial Administrator, and all the other management team and the deans and all the dignitaries present here. Very good evening once again to all of you. It's a great, very well presented learning experience for all of us in this gathering, in this evening. I was going through the messages which are just being poured into the chat box from the very beginning till now. And all these luminaries gathered from various parts of the world are now expressing how grateful they are. So if I am given an opportunity, I believe that I am given an opportunity to represent the participants who are actually benefited with this wonderful session today. So Christianity College is a family wherein, as Father Principal in the beginning in the inaugural session expressed, we have 3 entities with more than 7,500 students in the campus. Christianity College of Law also organizes a lot of activities, and we are blessed to have the presence of luminaries across the globe coming and interacting with the students. But at this moment of time, we are not able to meet people physically. So we are changing the scenario, making this situation as a blessing in disguise, making it convenient for people not to be physically present, but rather they can still be able to communicate with each other and share their wisdom and knowledge with each other. And it is in this context that we are gathered here this afternoon. And so after meeting all the dignitaries and their enthusiasm in learning and understanding, I'm really happy and I'm extremely honored to say thank you to Professor Dr. Jayashree for helping us this afternoon with your very vast and fluid, very simplified version of explanations that you have given all through the session. And sometimes when you say, as for a student, if you look at all your studies, maybe sometimes you would love your lower primary class days rather than your master's class days. One reason I believe is because the way the teachers teach you, the way the teachers express things. And I still remember the poem that I've learned in my 6th standard. Even I can still remember and recite it. It's there in my memory. So because the way the teacher was handling the language classes with poem was extremely touching, and it just registered in the memory. Similarly, I believe the way that you handle a very, very complicated issues of explanations, related to accidents and negligence and murder. And, I took some notes of your sessions, even though we have all the slides there as well. The way you explained it, as if then we were just saying, oh, is it that simple? I didn't know that. It's that simplified but very accurate way of explaining the whole concepts, which in these articles you mentioned. And at this moment, I wanted to thank you from the bottom of our heart, the way that you shared your wisdom with us, the way you explained it. In the name of Reverend Father Joseph Kuti PD, our principal, Reverend Father Dr. Agustin George, Vice Principal, and Reverend respected Dr. Mohan Arbola, our Principal of Law College, and all the faculty members and all the faculty and student body of the Christianity College family. We want to express our gratitude to you, and we are waiting forward to allowing your graciousness to come back, even webinar or of FDPs, or even otherwise, if God permits, very soon coming to the campus and illuminate us with your continuous expertise in various aspects of the law and similar related topics as well.
Definitely.
So at this moment, once again, I wanted to thank you, ma'am, for your gracious presence.
So I want to thank you all the faculty members
50
and the
doctorates
director for
joined in this
giving me
session.
giving me this opportunity, and they convey the topic. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you. I also wanted to express my gratitude to the Law College, Christianity Law College, for organizing such a insightful session. Especially wanted to thank Professor Preeti Joseph, the coordinator of the event, for guiding us through very systematically, without any confusion. Explained well, narrated well, and concluded it in time as well. Also wanted to thank all the luminaries and the professors and officials from various universities across the globe who consented to be available in this Saturday afternoon session. And your presence matters a lot, and I can see hundreds and hundreds of people have gathered, and people are all still waiting for the last moment of the session as well. So we are waiting, looking forward. Please, talk to us. Please chat to us, message us. Let us know if you or anyone have an expertise in any field of law or any similar allied fields. Please let us know, and we will be happy to gather you and connect with you, and we'll be creating more platforms like this. Christianity Colleges already have virtually, I heard recently, I was in a management meeting, I heard more than 27,000 people, professionals have already visited Christianity College virtually during this COVID-19 lockdown period. More than 27,000 was 2 days ago. And I would say today with 1,000 people plus registered in this session, number might be increasing. Christianity College family had an extensive 595 extracurricular conferences and seminars we conducted last academic 1 year itself. So you can understand how dedicated our faculty are, how committed the people are. Right now, I was visiting the panel room on the other side. There are already one session going on. So FDPs and webinars and conferences are now the fashion of the day or the convenience of the day. But we are definitely happy to associate with you. Please let us know if anyone can enlighten us with your expertise and your connectedness, and we will be happy to associate with you as well. And we will be updating you since you have shared your emails. If anything is happening in the field of law or any allied fields or anything interesting to you, we'll be letting you know. Please let us know about your feedback as well. So please feel free to let